know, it's a standard GNC procedure that when we have either L3 or L2 or whatever the emergencies where humanitarian coordination is taking place, we normally organize a call where we link in the country colleagues to provide us an update on the situation, the response to date, the strategy for addressing the situation, and then as highlighting some of the challenges, and then some key asks from the global partners in terms of what support we should provide them. Having said that, we are also aware that in a number of these countries, there's already so much ongoing, and there's input from the various regional offices, including the UNICEF regional office. But I'm also aware that a number of the NGOs or the partners on the ground would also have their own regional staff on the ground to support the country offices. So with that in mind, today we are ideally supposed to have a call focusing on Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Malawi. And as you all know, these are the three countries affected by the current cyclone Idai. We also have Mozambique has been, Mozambique has been formally declared as a L3, but we know nowadays we don't call it, L3. We kind of call it a scale up, but it's the same as the former L3. While the other two either L2s or thereabout, but not formally, declared as such, or not a L3. So with that in mind, we are going to start with Zimbabwe. Is it Toko who is making the presentation or somebody else? So with that, can we? Who is presenting? Is it
Toko? Are you online still?
Toko, are you still online?
It muted me. I've unmuted now.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you, Toko. So, would you like to present the slides for us and following, the outline that you have already on the screen? So go ahead, Toko.
No, that's fine. In Zimbabwe, as you know, 2 of our districts have been heavily affected, and then we've got 7 other districts which have just a few areas that were affected. But in total, we are looking at 270,000 people affected in the whole the whole region that was affected by the cyclone. And of those, we are looking at 37,000 children under the age of 5. And those include 3,905 children who are projected to have acute malnutrition. That figure of 3,905 includes both SEM and MAM. 90% of the SEM cases, and then 50% of MAM. We are only taking 50% of MAM because WFP is also preparing to come in with consoya blend, but that might take a bit of time. So in the meanwhile, we are using either RIUSF or RIUTF, where RIUSF is not available to treat the MAM cases that come through, because we are suspecting that in a few weeks' time we might have diarrheal diseases, and children with malnutrition, the numbers of children with malnutrition will increase. Hence, we are targeting those, including both SEM and MAM. And then, in terms of our people in need and targets, that's the same figure of 3,905 for SEM. and both the people in need and our target is the same, because it's only UNICEF that is supplying RIUTF to health facilities, and all other partners who are working with us access those commodities from health facilities and then support communities to access, as well as to support with follow-up of children who have acute malnutrition. And so far, 73 children are on the program. The number is still small because quite a number of health facilities in some areas are still not accessible. So these are the areas that are now accessible and have received supplies and are already treating children, just 73. But as of next week, more areas seem to be opening up, and we're going to intensify active screening, and that number will rapidly increase. For vitamin A supplementation, we are targeting 47,000 children 6 to 59 months. And the vitamin A supplies, again, are at the health facilities. But like we say right now, some health facilities are not yet accessible, but we will open also outreach points so that children within the communities can also access services. And for mothers and caregivers who require infant and young child feeding in emergency support, we are targeting 37,000. And we haven't had any figures come back to us yet as to how many have been reached, but mainly these are pregnant and lactating women. And so far, since the response started last week, a number of health facilities have actually received even some donations of infant formula, which have now been taken away so that they can be distributed only to those children who need it, because there was an overwhelming support from churches and other well-wishers throwing in whatever they have. And we noticed that there was infant formula. And because of that, we are actually issuing a statement to monitor breast milk substitutes, and also to alert everybody who is responding that we should not just let indiscriminate distribution of breast milk substitutes. The next slide. And then the priorities for now, we are ensuring distribution of nutritional commodities, equipment, as well as personnel, because some of the health workers in some institutions and health facilities are still missing since the beginning of the emergency. They can't be found. So we are deploying health workers from other health facilities and from other districts to man all health centers in those two districts and ensure that services are available for communities. In terms of commodities, we have started moving commodities to all facilities and all areas that are not accessible by road. There are helicopters that have been mobilized to move activities to those areas, but those that are accessible by road, we are moving commodities by road, and quite a lot of activities. We don't have commodities, we don't have figures as yet, but most health facilities have received. By the end of the week, we'll then know who has received what. And then the other ongoing needs, it's the treatment of acute malnutrition, capacitating health workers and community health workers so that they are able to identify children early and also able to treat those who present to health facilities. And of course, we are intensifying and strengthening the infant feeding support for both mothers, as well as monitoring the distribution of breast milk substitutes and donations to make sure that there are no violations. Next slide. The major gaps really on human resources. We have a field officers, a UNICEF field officer who has been deployed in the province that is mainly affected, and partners are working in there. But we will need at least extra support, at least one person who will be there looking solely at the emergency so that we can respond adequately. And in terms of gaps in financial resources, our gap is around $600,000, mainly for supplies, HR, as well as capacity building, as well as going into the community with outreach work to make sure that we reach out to all communities as much as possible. And then in terms of supplies, it will be for RUTF, therapeutic milks. Otherwise, at the present moment, we're using stocks that we had for regular programming. And once we get funding, we can replace those. Next slide. And in logistics, like I said, we still have many areas that are still accessible and are still only accessible by helicopter, but we have lifted quite a lot of nutrition supplies to those areas. And then financial resources, no resources allocated yet, but we are reprogramming and using what we had for regular programming to both to ensure that staff move into those areas and they are able to do all the logistics that are necessary, as well as the supplies that are needed. The moving target is really referring to the people in need, because some areas have not yet been accessed. You find that almost on daily basis there is an increase in the numbers of people in need. Like last week we were working with a figure of 250,000, and this week we are at 270,000, because there are some people that are still being uncovered under the rubble, and some people are still missing. So that figure might still continue to move and differ from week to week. I think the key requests that we had from GNC were assessments for HR needs, which are not yet finalized, but basically, like we say, it's just to strengthen the staff on the ground. I think then the other one was advocacy for partner mobilization towards nutrition in emergency, especially after right now the response plan that we prepared it up to June, but there will be early recovery, and I think the communities that have been affected will need support right up to the next harvest. And in our case, our next harvest is in March next year. So there will be early recovery and maybe prolonged support needed until they are able to plant and harvest again next year. Otherwise, those areas actually lost all their livelihoods and all their food. Next slide, if there is. Maybe that was the last one.
I think that could be the last one. Is there another slide, Anjali?
No, that's the last one.
The last.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Toko. I think it's really what you presented was very clear, and despite the fact that the needs are unfolding and there would be changes in terms of your targets and so on. Before we go to the next presenter, are there questions for clarification? Maybe further discussion could be done at the end when all the presentations are made. But do you have any reactions, any questions for clarification to Toko on Zimbabwe? No? Okay. Toko, it's The the figures in terms of those affected is the overall, but when it came to the target, is it the target for the collective, like for the entire response based on consultation with the 9 partners that you have listed there, or is the focus currently on the UNICEF input while you consolidate the need or the projection for the entire response? If you could explain that, that would be useful. The reason being, of course, there's the direct UNICEF input in terms of UNICEF's programmatic accountability, but we also would like, the coordination in terms of establishing what the need is and so on to go wider, to cover the entire sector partnership. So it would be good to explain that. And then the second question I have is, normally with a sudden onset emergency like this, there would be the flash appeal. And then after 30 days or so, there will be a need for revision because information would have become available for partners on the ground to again reassess what the need is, especially so because of the moving target issue that you have just explained. So I would like to understand whether this plan that you are presenting is like the first flash appeal, and then after that there will be a revision, and if so, when will that happen? So those are the 2 reactions I have. If you could respond to that, then we'll see whether there are other partners online to ask a question of clarification before we go to Malawi. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The first one on coordination, yes, UNICEF is leading the coordination of the sector, but the figures that we have there are really for targets that UNICEF is responsible for. Plus what I said was that UNICEF is responsible for supplying all the therapeutic commodities, the therapeutic feeding commodities. Even where we've got partners are involved at community level to mobilize communities and do active screening. But the actual treatment of children with acute malnutrition is really done by UNICEF and the Ministry of Health. It's done from health facilities and outreach points that are meant by Ministry of Health. And for that reason, the target that is there really is meant for the whole sector, because the other partners who are there will not necessarily target children with acute malnutrition, but they can target maybe where they are doing active screening. Then coming to the flash appeal, yes, the flash appeal that we have prepared now is for April to June. And I think if there's a revision, it will be done in June. We were asked to prepare, to project our needs for April to June.
Okay.
So that's where the figure of 696 is coming in.
Okay. Anybody with any additional reaction or question?
Hi, Choco. This is Sarah from Save the Children. I was just curious then, based on your last answer, the number of children that you listed in terms of the expected GAM cases, is that including sort of the instance that you would expect then through June? Or is that including scenarios or projections that would take into account any sort of failed harvest given the impact area?
It is just looking at children that we are going to see through June, the initial response that we will have. But going further, I think the situation will unfold, and then we will see which communities are really hard hit and they will require the continued support. But for now, this is projections up to June, end of June.
Okay. Any additional question? I also think maybe adding on to the last comment, what will really be useful is in the current context, if there's any need for mom treatment, then if that, because the number you have is for both mom and Sam, you said, right? Sorry, maybe I got it wrong.
It's for treatment of mom and Sam.
Okay, okay.
For instance,
Yeah, okay.
yes, it's for those who are being treated with therapeutic feeds. WFP, for instance, are projecting to look at all children under the age of 6 months to 59 months, who will need CSP and CSP plus. That's a different projection altogether from the 3,000 that we were talking about. The 3,000 are those that we admit into the IMAM program.
Okay. All right. No, that's a good enough clarification. But what would also be important is maybe the other additional projection. If it's part of the nutrition response, well, whether that could also be included, because now you have your flash appeal, but then the revision is up to June. So it's a question of how do we then capture the additional targets, which would be based on the projection, focusing on prevention. But I think that's something maybe you could take up internally and have a discussion, because at the end of the day, the current projection is not really,
it's on treatment, not prevention.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and then the final one before we go to maybe Malawi is that you did mention the influx of breast milk substitute, and it's good that it's already focused right from the beginning with a joint statement, but also the proper targeting of maybe the breast milk substitute. What would be important for you guys to look at is whether who are those, what's the percentage of non-breastfed children who would be really deserving such support. Oftentimes in this kind of emergency, they're completely forgotten and nobody focuses on them. And that is, it will really be important that the caseload is established in terms of who would be in need, and then what are the systems for the managed distribution, so that is properly targeted and for how long and so on. We have a number of other country examples maybe we could look at and try to share with you, so that it is done really in a very strict way without a spillover, but making sure that those small percentage are also covered in terms of the care. With that, any other comments for Toko? Otherwise, we go to Malawi if they're already up, or they are already.
I have a question.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead as we load. Yes. Somebody.
I have a question. It's Gwenaëlle from WFP about do you plan to target the pregnant and lactating women? Over.
Yes, we have a target for pregnant and lactating women. That is the 37,000 in those affected districts. 37,000 women are the ones that we are targeting.
But they're not, the minorities, will the admission criteria be based on malnutrition status, or it's blanket? Because I thought 37, which you had, was also the number of women who would also receive the caretakers, or the women who would receive infant and young child.
It's the caretakers that are going to receive infant and young child feeding support and messaging, but WFP will then come in to support with a targeted preventive ration. Exactly how the targeting will be done, I might not know at the moment.
Okay. Gwen, you had something else. I did. Sorry, I did cut you short.
No, it's fine. It's exactly the question I wanted to ask. Do we plan to support the malnourished acute, the acute malnourished pregnant and lactating women? So it's fine. So I will try to clarify that with our colleague in Zimbabwe.
Okay, I think we understand that everything happened fast and it's not easy to pull all the partners together to get the targets. But what would be useful is also for the collective partnership implementation targets and so on. It would be good to consult with the WFP to ensure that like the entire nutrition cluster response target, including the preventive aspect, is in one place. And we would say is that let that effort be made so that we have a comprehensive outlook in terms of what the 9 partners in support of government, including, of course, UNICEF, WFP, and the other NGOs on the ground, what is it that they are going to do to respond to the emergency collectively? Yeah. And then within that, of course, there will be the UNICEF input, there will be the WFP input, there will be other partners who might also bring other support on board. So I think that's all I would say. We can move to
Yeah, I think it's well noted.
Mm.
It's well noted. We are having a coordination meeting at the end of this week, and everybody will come onto the table with what they have. But we have already had discussions with the WFP, though not discussing figures per se. But yes, they are committed to come in with the CSP for the pregnant and lactating women. I think they're still working out their figures as well.
Yeah, and then when it comes to the figures, the financial requirement, it would also it can articulate the entire requirement, and then within that, what is required for UNICEF to meet is the obligation. Is this what is required from WPCs and then other partners as well? So with that in mind, thanks so much, Toko. I think it was very clear, and we really appreciate the fact that you and the team are able to pull this together within a short period of time. Now we go to Malawi. I don't know whether it's Stanley or who is presenting. The colleague from Malawi.
Hello, Josephine, can you hear us?
Hi, yeah.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so yes, I'm with Wilfred here. My name is Stanley Mase, and Wilfred is going to take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, Toko, and everyone else. Good afternoon.
Hi, yes, you can go ahead, Wilfred.
Okay, great. So from Malawi, as the first slide shows, we had over 868,000 people that were affected, and then 86,980 displaced, 672 injured, 59 deaths, 3 missing, and 173 currently in camps that have been set up. On the bottom right side, we have highlighted in yellow, those are the districts that are most affected. So out of 15 districts, we have 11 that are kind of seriously affected, and the numbers are there in terms of under 5 PLWs and the total population. On the top right, basically, is an indication of the proportion or percentage of women and male affected. So 52% overall are female, and then 48 are male. So basically, that is a summary of the first slide. Can we move to the second, please? Right. So, well, on the second slide, what we have put here is the reports from our monthly screening data, admission data, as well as that is for MAM and SAM. So the top one up here is for January. So what we see in red, 4,236 children were admitted in SAM. That was January 2019. So if you look at February, the one below directly, you have 4,462 admitted. That is February. So 2% increase in the SAM admission. So just to indicate clearly upfront that we don't have the mass screening data yet. So this one is actually the routine data across all the districts. So we hope that in our next call, we'll be able to provide details and updates on the data, screening data from the affected district. So in yellow, we had like 9,219 MAM cases. So in February, it went up to 11,296. So a 4% kind of increase. And then for PLW, we had 3,240 PLWs that were admitted. And in February, we had 3,342. So on the far right is basically the performance indicators. So for February, we have a cure rate of 92.4%, MAM cure rate of 90.2%, defaulter rate of 1.8, MAM defaulter 5.8, SAM death rate of 3.0, and MAM death rate of 0.3. So we have started receiving the screening data, and what we can mention here is that as of now, there is really not much significant difference in terms of escalating some MAM cases, but we are monitoring the situation, and we're looking forward to the projections for next week. Next slide, please. Right, so this one, what we have here, the achievements per activity, that one will provide updates in our next call. But 178,192, actually, those are our figures in terms of people in need. Now, this is the under 5 and PLWs calculated at 17% for the affected population for under 5 children, and at 5% for pregnant, and also 5% for lactating women. So on the funding side, it's basically 100% gap. Now, what we have here, 8 million, this is total 8,265,000. This is UNICEF internal. But for the cluster budget, we had it at 2,400 and something million, 2.4 million, and zero commitment so far from partners as yet. So we have a meeting on Monday, and then we hope that now that the response plan draft is in place, we should be able to get commitments. And then just below that, we're targeting 1040, and for our February achievements across that's nationwide, we have 4,462 SAM cases that have been admitted and being treated. And then for MAM, our target is 4,649, and the achievements for February was 11,296. So for vitamin A supplementation and IOSCFE, we would want to update that in our next meeting, because we are trying to reconcile a bit around the figures. But what we have here, we're looking at 111,457 children as the target, and we are assuming that 15,758 actually have been reached, but then we should be able to have a revised figures in our next call. So basically, the procurement and distribution of MAM supplies for children and SAM supplies for adolescents and adults, this is something that we are considering as a major intervention to redeem the situation, or to try to reduce the situation from deteriorating. So, but then the funding remains a challenge, and then we're going to see how that possible is going to be done. Next slide, please. So in emerging strategic nutrition priorities, basically our goal is to contribute to the prevention and treatment of acute malnutrition among the flood-affected population, particularly the women and children. So we're hoping that it will avert mortality and morbidity among these target groups. So priorities we have that we've discussed as a cluster and highlighted is the management of acute malnutrition in 11 most affected districts. So that was highlighted in slide 1. And then we hope to conduct daily mass screenings in the camps and monthly active case finding in the affected communities. So the mass screening has started, and we already have data for some of the districts. And we would continue as part of the plan in the coming weeks so that the 11 priority districts will be completed, and then we do active case finding in the remaining districts. Then community mobilization and orientation of health workers for active case finding and to refer identified malnourished children for treatment. And then we're also looking at ensuring the integration of nutrition screening with MNCH services, including outreach clinics. Important to know that the mobile health team have been initiated, and the nutrition components will be an integral part of that mobile team, now going to some of the districts and areas that are not accessible. So we are looking forward to strengthening IYCFE activities in collaboration with cluster partners and C4G. So we're getting some support from the regional office. So as early as Monday, we would be in the field to strengthen this component. And lastly, we're looking at cluster coordination support to district nutrition clusters to strengthen the overall nutrition response. So this is at the national as well as the district level. So there is meetings that are happening. Next slide, please. Okay, anticipated gaps in resources. So human resource-wise, we think that it's adequate. Looking at, we would use existing human resource to respond, basically as UNICEF. There are field monitors and other human resource in the field already. And we have set up a sub-office in Blantyre where we have all the sectors are represented, and we do have emergency coordination meeting every second day, so Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, to update intersectorally, including nutrition. On the financial resource side, 8.265 to 8,265,000 is what is being requested as UNICEF. But as I indicated, for the cluster, we're looking at just over 2.5 million for the 3 months response. So our response plan is for 3 months, April, May, and June. Supply is adequate, so we have enough RUTF, F75, F100, and then it's just a matter of pre-positioning them and transporting them as the needs arises. But then we also are procuring some additional stock just in case the situation gets worse. Next slide. In terms of challenges in achieving strategic priorities, limited number of nutrition partners involved in the response. So they have got limited resources, that's financial and human resources. So we are looking forward to maybe do some needs assessment or a gap analysis in our next cluster meeting to see how prepared are the partners, each of the partners, in terms of human resource and financial resources. And then we would have a better picture or clearer picture in our next meeting. Then we have issues with access to some of the locations. It remains a challenge, but I think that is easing out as we go by. We are hopeful that the situation will not, that is the rainfall situation will not worsen, so that we can then have access to some of the areas that were inaccessible in the past. And then I think importantly, there's need for rapid financial resource mobilization for nutrition activities. This remains a challenge because if you look at it, the bottom line is UNICEF and WFP that are actually responding to this. So we need to look at a mechanism where the partners actually are able to advocate to get more resources to respond in a timely manner. Right. Next slide, please. And then the key acts from the GNC partners: support to cluster resource mobilization activities is to highlight nutrition priorities. So I think that GNC partners to support advocacy on the needs and resource gaps. We are hoping that you would engage global UN actors for additional nutrition activities such as blanket supplementary feeding. This is something that has been under consideration, but based on our discussions with WFP, I think they don't have adequate resources at the moment to roll that out. And then lastly, needs and gaps currently being assessed. So we've had two major rapid assessments, and as we move forward, we are assessing the situations, the needs and the gaps. And so, especially in terms of additional technical support, this will determine in the next cluster meeting as well to see if what support are needed. But I would say that for UNICEF, the team is quite prepared, and both technically and resource, particularly the supplies. So from a cluster point of view, it's just not to see that all the other actors actually are on board and that we are ready to respond. I think that's all. Any others? Joko?
Hello?
Were you getting me? Because then it got quiet. I hope you heard me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear
so
you.
That's the end of our presentation. Over to you.
Sorry, I missed that one. Hello, I missed your last point.
Yes, I'm saying that we've just finished presenting, so over to you. If there are any questions, so
okay, yeah. Okay, yes, sorry, I was talking on mute. I'm so sorry about that. Yes, so Toko is still on. I think it would also good for the other countries to benefit from Malawi and finally Zimbabwe's presentation. So Toko, you because at the end of the day there will be additional questions, maybe discussions. So I would request that you stay on both of
Yes,
you.
I am.
Yeah.
So Josephine.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, please, over to you. Sorry, I was referring to you. So please take over the floor if there are questions or any other thing, so we can provide additional clarification and information. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I was on mute. I was talking to myself. Sorry about that. Yeah. Thanks so much, Wilfred, for again another clear presentation. What to me, again, given the time frame within which you guys have to pull this together quickly, I really appreciate the time you are able to spend on this and to bring a number of the issues to us. What will be useful is in both Malawi, but also in Zimbabwe, you have already an ongoing CIMAM program, and then now you have this flood. So what will be useful is going forward when you are updating your plan to be clearer in terms of the targets for the 11 districts that are severely affected, if those are the ones that will be prioritized. And then within that also being clear in terms of the numbers, programmatically, both for CIMAM, for IYCF, and other preventive action. The second point I have is similar to Malawi, rather to Zimbabwe, I think, is the need also to ensure that the financial the target is for the entire response, regardless of partner, the leadership or the mandate within the various partners. And then also the costing has to be done for the entire response, so that is easier for partners at global level. And normally in these calls, we also have donors joining this call. So if we have a comprehensive financial requirement for the entire response, it's easier for a donor to say what is needed rather than just the financial requirement for the UNICEF related mandate. But I can understand, and you did mention that you are working on consolidating the financial requirement for the entire cluster partnership response, which is okay, but I just want to also still emphasize on that. The other comment I would have is Zimbabwe, I think the delivery of the response is normally through the government structures and the UN agencies and also the NGOs provide support towards that. So it would also be important to articulate in your plan what is the support, rather what activities are going to be delivered in support of the government, especially where the response is government-led. With that in mind, with those three comments, I would open up maybe for one or two questions before we go to Mozambique.
Oops, Josephine, this is Adelaide in Brazzaville for WHO Afro.
Oh, hello. Hi, Adelaide. Yeah, come on board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the two presenters that I've listened to for very clear presentations. I'm actually going from this teleconference to a three-level call on Mozambique with the WHO emergencies team. And what we are trying very hard to do as the nutrition team within WHO is to ensure that we work in coordination with the health cluster works in coordination with the nutrition cluster. So I would be very grateful to hear from our colleagues in the three countries how it's working with WHO and with the health cluster, so that I can take back this feedback to them to strengthen coordination. Over.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Adelaide. It's quite a very important question. In fact, I had in my other note the link with the wash and health, especially in the context where, you know, in the context of flooding, we expect the outbreak of acute watery diarrhea, even cholera, God forbid. But if that happens, right, currently, is there any proactive collaboration between health and nutrition, but also the other sectors? So would you, either of you, like to, before that, any other question online before the colleagues take those two questions and then we go to Mozambique?
Okay, so can we respond to the two questions?
Yeah, there's no question online. So yes, is that Wilfred? You want to start, and then Toko can also add what they are doing from the Zimbabwe side. Yeah, so go ahead, Wilfred.
Okay, so this is Stanley, Josephine, and so first I'll try to address Adelaide's question in terms of the coordination that we have with the various clusters, including health, WASH. In Malawi, the coordination is, at the moment being done by government. DODIMA, which is the Department for Disaster Management, is actually leading the whole coordination process. They've set up an which is down south. And all the clusters are supposed to be providing, updates every morning and every evening when they come back from the field. And part of that is also ensuring that there is proper coordination amongst the clusters. And in his presentation, Wilfred did mention about the mobile teams that are going around in the camps on health, nutrition, WASH, and general messaging. So there is proper coordination in there, and screening for acute malnutrition has been integrated, as well as messaging for prevention of malnutrition has been integrated. So yes, there is very good collaboration that's ongoing at the moment on the ground.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Stanley. Toko, would you like to come in to explain?
Thank you. In Zimbabwe, we also are collaborating quite closely. Every week we have 2 inter-cluster coordination meetings where we meet with the health cluster and the WASH cluster and the other clusters, so that we see how we can coordinate on the response on the ground. So yes, we are actually looking out for what could easily happen, especially with cholera, with all the water that has happened. So we collaborate quite closely. And even in terms of moving commodities, we are moving our commodities together, both health and nutrition.
Okay. Okay, Adelaide, any addition? Has that responded to your question? I guess the point here is it has to be a continuous effort. There's one overarching coordination which would normally be at intersectorial level, like the one Zimbabwe, rather Malawi has just explained, but there's also the sectorial linkages where you can discuss piggybacking interventions, working closely together, and so on. So I think that the two countries have explained both, but from my side, what is really important is ensuring that that continues, and as the situation progresses and maybe potential outbreaks might set in, and we just need to be vigilant about the collaboration with other sectors. And that also reminds me about the importance of or not shying away from whether or not general food distribution is ongoing. What are the gaps? How can we advocate better with the food security cluster to ensure that if we see any gap or so, it's really addressed so that at the end of the day, we all work together to meet the needs of the affected population. There are quite a number of other comments on the comment box, but in the interest of time, I would revisit them later. I think let's go to Mozambique, and then we'll come back to some of those comments which we have received so far, quite a few of them. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Hi, I'm Dorothy from UNICEF in Mozambique. I'm here with Grania from Regional Office. Maybe before I get into our presentation, I'd like to respond to the question about the health and nutrition cluster linkages. How is it working? Here in Mozambique, the clusters are at the national level are meeting separately, but at the subnational level, we have 3 clusters established that are joint health and nutrition clusters. So there's been fairly good coordination where it counts, and I would say here at national level we're well coordinated as well. The initial health screenings that are done by the Ministry of Health teams do include screening for GAM, and in terms of aligning interventions, we are putting into place a BP5 distribution for pregnant lactating women with MAM or HIV. We are having vitamin A and deworming go out with the measles immunizations in the next phase, but urgently we have 5 cases of cholera that have been confirmed. And so there's a big push at the moment on a cholera vaccine, and obvious linkages with WASH are getting top priority. We were going to link the vitamin A and deworming with the cholera, but operationally it was decided that would be too much and would potentially delay the urgency of the cholera vaccine. So vitamin A and deworming will come later with measles. So that's just a quick response to how the coordination is working here between the health and nutrition clusters. So meeting separately at the national level, but coordinating and having a joint combined health nutrition cluster meetings at subnational level in 3 places.
Oh, that's really great. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Yeah. So you can start your presentation. Thanks for responding.
So just to start with a big thanks to Grania for helping to prepare the presentation. Yeah, Mozambique was hardest hit by the cyclone, and the figure that we're operating now is 1.85 million people affected, and I can run you through the breakdown of nutritionally vulnerable groups later. We have 5 provinces of the country that are considered to be affected. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm not going to go into detail in this. This is all taken from the flash appeal, so you can get the gist of it. The death toll is, as of 3 days ago, was at nearly 500 people, and it continues to rise as the waters recede. There are some places that are still submerged, but we understand that the waters are going down and that that people are slowly starting to be able to walk to places drier, higher land where they can get help. There are 143 sites across the country where we're calling accommodation centers, where people are housed until, since their homes have been destroyed. So next slide, please. This is a summary of the flash appeal that is related to the cyclone and floods. We have 9.5 million for nutrition. There was a previous flash appeal related to the droughts that was another 2 or 3 million, I believe. So, so if you look at the next slide, then you can see, I think it's mentioned the total. But for this emergency, it's 9.5 million. Next slide. Right, so yeah, there you see the 12.5 total required, which includes 3 for the drought and 9.5 for the floods. So in terms of the priority activities on nutrition, priority is around screening and treatment for SAM and MAM, nutrition supplies for therapeutic feeding and micronutrient supplements as well, the rapid assessments that are currently being done primarily through the government channels, but we have NGOs sort of popping up that we're also trying to coordinate so that they follow the same protocol and link with the system. We also have planned to do IYCF counseling and promotion, yeah, both in the community and facility level. That will come a bit later when the dust settles, but for the moment the priorities are on screening and treatment of acute malnutrition. Next slide. Next slide, please. Sorry, it's not.
Yeah, it's up. Can you say, Dorothy?
Yes.
You can see, right?
Okay, my computer is lagging. Okay, yeah, I just emerging concerns. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, there are 5 cases confirmed today of cholera. So the campaign with the cholera vaccine is starting next week. In terms of food security, there has been large losses of food stores and the urgent need to get the next season's crops planted. WFP has started distributing food baskets to areas that are accessible, the usual that includes corn and oil and rice and high energy biscuits, and they're also dropping high energy biscuits by air to difficult to reach areas that are still flooded or inaccessible. Unfortunately, there has been donations of breast milk substitutes that have been received on an exceptional basis by the ministry. The good news is that they are taking quite seriously the guidelines for their controlled use, and have today we are issuing a joint statement between UNICEF, WHO, WFP, Save the Children and World Vision, with input from UNAIDS, and the joint statement follows many that have been done in other places on prohibiting the donations and how to manage them. The ministry is not an official partner on that statement, but they are planning to release a similar statement of their own. So I think the initial political pressure, they accepted the donation as an exceptional thing to their own policy, but at the moment they seem to be taking quite seriously the control of the product. HIV is a concern. There's 13% prevalence in the general population. So there is some guidance in the joint statement on breastfeeding with HIV, with some concerns about ART disruption. But this is part of the reason why we've decided to link BP5 distribution for PLWs with MAM or HIV, not only for their nutritional needs, but also to support their ART seeking. Tomorrow there will start the rapid multi-sectoral assessments led by the government's National Institute for Disaster Management. This assessment will include nutrition, along with health, wash, protection, and other things. The focus is on Beira, urban area. Initially, that's the port city that was hardest hit. And they're also going to be looking at the functionality of health facilities. Next slide. So our key gaps at the moment really are around human resources. It's been difficult to find qualified nutritionists with the right language skills, but fortunately we have found some Portuguese and Spanish-speaking nutritionists with emergency experience. Financially, we have a SURF proposal that's been submitted, but it's for a very small proportion of the overall need. So we are in conversations with USAID, Food for Peace, and OFTA, and are trying to get information coordinated from others on who they are also seeking support from. We have supplies in country, except for everything except for the BP5s, which are on the way or if not already landed. And the focus will be on replenishing stocks that are now being depleted for the emergency area. So next slide. Yeah, here's the joint statement. That'll be going out in English today and Portuguese we hope tomorrow. Next. Right, so as mentioned earlier, currently the nutrition cluster is meeting twice weekly at the national level. It's chaired by the Ministry of Health with UNICEF support. At the sub-national level, we have 3 different clusters that are combined health and nutrition. And we have dedicated staff at the sub-national level and at the national level at the moment, but there's going to be some turnover as we get surge deployments in. At the moment, our key actions are focused around getting standardized screening tools to be used by all partners and all platforms to follow up on the BMS donation, the guidelines and their use, and then an urgent mapping for who's doing what, where, and when. That's underway, but needs a lot of proactive follow-up. Okay, next. So our key asks are that the new agencies in country, as they please make the UNICEF and Ministry of Health the first point for liaison at the twice-weekly meetings, align their response to the national policy and tools and systems wherever possible, and then urgently need some solid funding commitments in order to scale this up quickly. Next.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Dorothy, and thanks, Gronya, for pulling this together really quickly. We know how difficult it can be, and we appreciate that. With that, now, those who are not talking, can you mute a little bit because there's some background noise? Can we open it up for discussion, questions? Any additions, comment? Oh, Gronya, do you have anything to add before on Mozambique, but also from a regional perspective, maybe if you have other comments on the rest of the other 2 countries, that would be great too.
No, actually, I'm fully on Mozambique right now. Joan, our regional advisor, is in Zimbabwe, and we're sending Marjorie on our emergency team to Malawi. So we are dealing with the countries on a case by case. For those partners, when we declare an L3 in the UN, it has different levels of accountability. So for Mozambique, it's now being managed by our headquarters, and then Malawi and Zimbabwe are being led by the regional office. So there's different levels of support. So we're supporting at all levels from UNICEF on all the clusters. But I think Dorothy gave a good overview, and we're happy to answer questions as needed. Thanks.
Yeah, I see the quick question from Micah.
This is Micah.
Yes,
Micah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The question I put in the box was already answered. Thank you in your slide about the subnational cluster. So I just wanted to chime in on the issue of HIV. Sorry, I did something. Yeah, you're still hearing me. Yeah. We issued a report about HIV and infant feeding in emergencies, and I'll put the link in the chat box. And that report, it has a table. It is meant to be, of course, there's a lot of words and narrative. And of course, the issue is, there's not one solution. And that's why we made the table with the different scenarios. And I think what is important is that, I guess, ideally the country at national level, but it might need to be centralized, that there is some decision making going on when there are no antiretroviral drugs available temporarily, of what is the best infant feeding option to ensure HIV-free survival. And I think most likely, particularly for the youngest children, say under 1 year of age, I think it will most likely continue to be breastfeeding. But of course, there are different factors. And yeah, so just to say, I would suggest that people, I guess in all three countries, these issues come in. But yeah, so there are some tools, and I hope they can be put to use. But like I said, there's not just one size fits all. There is a bit of discussion needed and decision making. But it is very important, to take that into account, to look at the risk, assessment and see what is the best option if the ARVs are temporarily not available. Over.
Okay. No, that's well noted, and the link to the guidance is there already. And maybe just to add that on the BMS monitoring, we also have a tool on the GNC website. It is under Information Management Toolkit. So that could also be something that can be easily adapted and used in your context. But I would also like to emphasize that it's very good. Mozambique did mention the linkage between the response and also HIV/AIDS, because I think, at least having worked in Malawi, I know that HIV/AIDS is also an issue. So it will really be important to ensure that it's mainstreamed, and the response also takes into account the pre-existing condition, which could actually be made worse given the current situation. With that, any other comment online?
Hi, this is Sarah from Save the Children. I thank you for those presentations, and I had a question specific to Mozambique on the assessment. I might have misunderstood, because it sounds like you're doing quite a bit on IYCFE through the joint statement and BMS management, or at least that was prioritized. But then you had mentioned that IYCFE was not being seen as an immediate need. So I'm just curious whether IYCFE is being included in the multisectoral assessment that you mentioned, and what justification there was to not consider IYCFE as a first phase. Is it that the existing capacity in the government is meeting those needs, or could you just unpack that a little bit more for us?
Sorry, could you clarify what you mean by IYCF in the initial assessments? Like, would they be asking if people are breastfeeding or not? Because, can you clarify, or what you mean?
Just to ask what is happening with children under the age of 2 in the affected areas, if women are changing practices, or what practices are post-cyclone, what needs there are for this age group.
Sorry, just to clarify, Sarah, I think you misunderstood. We didn't say it wasn't a priority in phase 1. It absolutely is a priority in phase 1. The assessment that's starting tomorrow is a rapid assessment led by the government, and we unfortunately were unable to influence the questions that they were asking. So the only nutrition question they're asking is, because it's a household survey, is do you have a malnourished person in the house? Yes or no? Are the health facilities operational? But all of the programs that are going on right now, in fact, are designed, SAM to some extent, but also IYCFE is getting an absolute priority. So I think there was, maybe you misunderstood.
No, I think I understand. I did say that, our initial response is focusing on the screening and making sure that screening and treatment is available for malnourished children. But as part of that, the health workers and the community health workers who are involved in the response are going to continue using the IYCF counseling materials that they are already trained on and that they are already using. So that is ongoing. What I mentioned that we are planning as a additional support is going to be around training more people, involving NGOs and training, and just trying to make sure that we have more people trained on IYCF counseling. But that's not something that we're going to prioritize in the first 2 to 3 weeks. So I mean, we need to get people sheltered, fed, and with safe water first, and then we're going to. Meanwhile, people who are in place who are already trained certainly are paying attention on IYCF and but I think our additional support will kick in once we, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, once we have a better grip on who our partners are. I guess I can also add, you may notice in our flash appeal that we have 4 partners, because we had 2 UN agencies that were well sort of coordinated, and then within 12 hours before the flash appeal was due, we had 2 NGOs pop up. But we know there are a lot of other NGOs that are active. So one of our priorities in terms of coordination at the moment is finding out who is doing what and making sure everybody's coming to the table. Because at the moment not everybody is there. So we're trying to get everybody there at the table.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it's a very important point. After that, Maya, you're still online. I'll give time for you to ask the question you like to ask. But on the MIRA, or the multi-sectorial assessment, which is normally done immediately after a rapid onset emergency like this, for nutrition, I've always advocated for the fact that if there's an up-to-date baseline data, we should use data now, say, with the additional, the flood or the change in the situation in terms of access to water and so on, how the situation could change. Because in most of the MIRA assessments, they don't add nutrition. But even if they do, this is a rapid onset. How much a change would you see? It's better to, plan based on what you know, and then adding on top the current situation, which in this case is flood, destruction of health facilities, and so on and so forth. So I kind of tend to agree with the decision here that adding whether there's a child is in a program also wouldn't add that much. Similarly, even assessment on IYCF, we need to give it a time, but at the same time, that will not stop us from planning a IYCF e-response, because we know what the situation is and we know what the baseline is in terms of infant and young child feeding. So with that, I would, Maya, you had a long comment. Do you like to come in and quickly say something about question on cholera? Yeah.
Yeah, it's more in case that cholera indeed is going to be a real issue, which now 5 confirmed cases, so we won't stick to 5. If we would see quite a lot of comorbidity of SAM and cholera, I think the cluster coordinators, as well as the government, as well as UNICEF, WHO, has to decide how and where that the treatment of SAM takes place, if at all, in a cholera treatment center or not. We have seen that these decisions have not been taken in Yemen timely, nor in the Horn, and it led to a lot of problems. So it's either that you start a treatment in a cholera treatment center for SAM already, and if so, the products have to be there and have to be agreed upon, and the health cluster has to be on board, and the Ministry of Health. So just a note of caution here, that this has to be sorted out prior to the disaster.
Yeah, thank you. So just a quick response. We are working now with the guidelines for SEM treatment in the case of AWD from Ethiopia. There are designated cholera treatment centers set up, and we are in close touch with the health cluster. The products are available in country, and so it's thank you for the reminder that we can take a decision on that probably pretty quickly. So,
but be aware that in those guidelines for Ethiopia, there are mistakes. So be aware that there are some issues still around that, and especially on the use of RDTs as well, the rapid diagnostic test. So be careful.
Could you send a corrected guidance then? That would be appreciated, because we're using what we have, but if you are aware that that one's not correct, we would really appreciate a corrected one.
The corrected ones are still in the make by the cholera task force, the case management group. So it's not there yet, but I can help you. We can have a separate call and to identify where maybe the hurdles might be.
Yeah, actually for the case of Yemen, we had a similar discussion with Maya, but we also quickly brought the cholera task force team on board so that they can advise accordingly in terms of what is in place and what is not. And as Maya said, it would be useful maybe to just have a separate chat on that. But yeah, somebody was coming in. I'm sorry, I cut you. So.
No, sorry, this is just Kiralee from MSF. Just to say, I know obviously there's always problems with all guidelines. Our MSF cholera guidelines are now publicly available, which we actually did a lot of work on the chapter on SAM and cholera, did a lot of review on the literature. There isn't obviously huge amounts of studies, but with a lot of our experience as well, we tried to put in what we thought would be the best rehydration management. What Mia and I have actually talked about is that there's a, it says you don't need to start therapeutic feeding as quickly as you can within 4 hours, which isn't very detailed, and we know we need to develop that more, but we will be, treating in our CTCs that we are going to be opening in Beira. But just to say that those guidelines are publicly available if anybody's interested.
Okay. All right.
Please share.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, may I maybe suggest that, I don't know, in a week's time also we could have just such a chat. And when we did that for Yemen, Zita from WHO was able to immediately link us to the cholera task force, and we could also then engage MSF and Maya, so that we will be clear there are differences in the existing, and then basically outlining that, and then what countries can do, because at the end of the day, what WHO, as we do not want to see, is having several guidance thrown at you with the different questions, and then it's difficult. You need to make a decision. This is an emergency response, so it's clarity in what you should and you shouldn't do is what you need at this point. So
Yes.
I would really suggest that we have that call. And those who are interested could send an email to Angeline on this call, and then we can organize, and the interested partners could be part of that. Just a short discussion on what we should and we shouldn't do based on the various guidance, and that should be enough. And then countries can adapt that and just run with it.
Yes, just a note that it has to be in the health cluster, has to be involved.
Yeah,
we cannot do that only from the nutrition cluster, because they normally
clear, very clear. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's clear. And Adelaide, in your next call, if you could also emphasize that. I don't know whether Adelaide is still on, but yeah, we'll
yeah, I'm still on. I'm still on.
Okay, all right then. Any other additional comment from the colleagues online? We normally, because it's 3 countries, we would always advise that we just take exactly 1.5 hours. So we are left with 9 minutes to conclude this call. So I'm just being cognizant of that, but I would like to take additional comments and then we wrap up. Any comments, any more questions, or those online? Angeline, do you see more comments that we have not responded to online?
No, I think we've addressed most of the comments in the chat box.
Okay. All right. Normally what we do then, if keep thinking, if something crops up, we'll be happy to respond. But maybe just starting with the key asks from Mozambique, I would like to kind of emphasize the 3 key asks are very, central to the cluster work. One is really, I mean, you can see how colleagues are struggling with pulling together the targets, the funding requirements, and so on. So just to emphasize that it's not only in Mozambique, but in the other 2 countries, it will be very important to ensure that where there's a working group or a coordination mechanism, the sector coordination platform is really being used, and it becomes our go-to place to plan, to question things, and so on and so forth. The second point, again, I would like to emphasize from the Mozambique presentation is, again, the need to these are countries where, you know, there's already strong government leadership and ongoing response, and it will really be important that we just don't go run around and do our own things, but we try as much as possible to align what we do in those affected regions with what is ongoing. But of course, you know, the need to save lives still remains a priority, but the little we can do to align whatever we are doing with what's ongoing would be important. And I think it just made basically some key messages to us. And finally, the key ask around funding, Dorothy and Gronia, I'm not very clear whether was it 19 million or 9.5, and then together with the drought, it was 12.5.
Correct. So 9.5 for the cyclone and floods, and a pre-existing 3 million for the drought.
Yeah, unlike the other two countries.
Yes.
Unlike the other two countries, my question then is that for the collective, the response, or do we assume that more partners are coming on board and maybe, given the situation is you know, unfolding, the need could be more? Or can we say that, well, we really think, given the time frame, this is what we're able to pull together, but maybe if we ask the WAP more or the other partners, and also we might increase our target. So I just want to understand, is that the financial requirement for the next 3 months, or it could change once the place opens up a little bit more?
I think it could certainly change, because there are many partners on the ground that are working on nutrition, and we don't have their inputs into the nutrition cluster of Flash Appeal. So I very much think it could change. I don't know if there's going to be a second Flash or not. But if so, I would expect many more partners to be joining. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think what would happen is there will be a revision of that, but it could be turned, since this is a L3, it will be turned into a proper response plan, and then by which time you can accommodate the additional targets and additional financial requirement in that document. Yeah.
Yeah, we would certainly hope to have that opportunity, and hope that by then we would have a much better sense of which partners are doing what on the ground.
Yeah. Okay, so from the key ask, just to conclude on Mozambique, there are a few action points which we would try to flash out, and the cholera one, and then, yeah, I think the cholera one is key, and then there are some documents that would have to be shared with you, including the HIV/AIDS one. Other than that, I don't see from the three key asks, two of them are really more better partnership and working together and making sure that, you know, we inform each other on what we are doing, and then have a one consolidated plan which is aligned. And then the second one is around the funding, but there might be revision into the funding requirement, but basically the partners on the call, donors or alike, you know, we know what the needs are. So advocating and through this call, but also would share this widely. So we'll try to emphasize this, plus maybe 2-3 weeks down the road, we might decide whether we need another call again just to see where you guys are. So that is for Mozambique. Anything on Mozambique additional other than those discussions? Dorothy?
No further points. Thanks so much for the support.
Okay. What do we have for Malawi? What are the three key asks? If we could go through that quickly. Yeah. For Malawi, oh, is that Malawi? Yeah. It's again resource mobilization and advocacy, but I would really advise that you revisit your resource requirement to ensure that it accommodates the entire need. And then the global partner engagement, especially around the need or the requirement for blanket supplementary feeding and so on. One, it depends, I think, on the need. Where is it needed? Is it articulated in your response plan? And we have 2 or 1 WP colleagues online But I think, Gwen, I would suggest that the discussion in terms of the need for blanket or not be held so that it is incorporated in the current response plan.
Yes, definitely, it will be.
Yeah, and then the third key ask was around the need and the gap currently we require additional technical support. We have the tech RRTs, the technical RRT capacity. If you are very clear in terms of what technical capacity you need, then the tech RRT colleagues would start thinking about it. So it would be good if you could be clearer in terms of what the requirement is. Once you do that, then we will liaise with the Andy and the team to ensure that that capacity is met if the individuals are not deployed. Luckily, the language requirement is not an issue in Malawi, so that should be okay. So let's go to.
Sorry, Josephine. We just wanted to react to the.
Okay, you want to react? Okay, yes. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. And just to say that yes, you are right in terms of the budget. The 2.4 is really like you said, just UNICEF and WFP. And yes, we are going to revise this. We are meeting again as a cluster on Monday, and we'll make sure that we include inputs from the other partners as well. Okay. I think the major gap in the next 3 months is going to be on community mobilization as well as screening. Because in terms of the supplies, fortunately we had self-funding, which has covered the supplies for the next 3 months. So both WFP and UNICEF, we are okay with the supplies in the next 3 months, but it's going to be the complementary activities that, where we have the gap. So we will be discussing with the partners and we will revise the figures. Okay. In terms of the technical support, yes, Marjorie is coming this Sunday. We have agreed on key issues that she's going to cover, and one of which will also be, an overall assessment and looking at moving forward, what are going to be the needs and where the gaps are. So basically, yes, we are going to be much clearer after the visit in terms of what additional technical support will be requiring.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Sorry, in terms of the BSF, I think this is really focusing on the camps. So it's we had a discussion as a cluster, and we realized that there are food security issues in the camps, and we thought we need to intervene with a BSF for the children 6 to 23 months, as well as the pregnant and lactating women. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot for that clarification. So it seems they are all kind of covered. The funding bit, you would work on that. The BSF, it's only camps and the pregnant and lactating, while the need for additional technical, it would be reassessed after the regional office visit, and then you would let us know what specific support is needed. Yeah. So let's move quickly and just conclude. Oh God, we are 1 minute over, but Zimbabwe, they talked of assessment of human resource needs, which is not yet finalized. So my assumption is once that is finalized, Toko, you will let us know, and also you will let the regional office know what the additional support is then. And I think Gronya did say that John is in country, so in coordination with the regional office, the need we would meet is what cannot be met in country and also by the various agency regional office capacities. So let us know what that support is once you are able to establish the gap. On the resource mobilization, like Malawi, we will do, as we discussed, it would be good if you could go back to the, establish the need comprehensively, and then thereafter let, all this is going to be available in the orchard or OPS, the system. So it will be very important to ensure that the need is, the financial requirement is reflected adequately for the collective response, including, of course, the input from UNICEF and WFP and others. And therefore, once that is done, then, of course, it will really be much easier for us to also advocate and continue helping you in terms of raising the financial requirement gaps with the donors at global level. So with that, I would, Toko, do you have anything else you want to say before I close? Are you on mute or have you left?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was saying, yeah, I concur with what you've just said. And Joanne and Matthew are actually in the field to do an assessment of the needs, because we just put together what we have at national level. So we will come back with a clearer picture.
Okay. All right. With that, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the presenters and those who are behind the figures and the preparation. Really, thank you so much, and also thanks to the regional office, Gronia, for stepping in, especially in Mozambique, given the workload that colleagues are facing, and also Angeline Grant, our help desk officer, for liaising with the respective countries, and all of you for attending. We would write up, the presentation will be made available we'll post it on the GNC website, while the notes would be shared within the next two days or so. So with that, thank you so much, and we will let you know after how long we would need to have another call just to update ourselves. But we also need to give time for the colleagues on the ground to really run with the response. So thanks a lot, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.